Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the third episode of the Wholistic Center, the podcast that highlights or that goes into the fundamental questions of what do ancient civilizations and philosophies have to teach a modern world. My name is Nicolas Zart, and I am your host. And I guess that was the Holistic Center is my little brainchild for the last few decades or so. It's a platform where we bring together all of these different types of philosophies and everything. But the Holistic Center has a philosophy of its own. It's spelled with a W for a reason. It's because it is holistic in the sense of the whole, not just holy. So it really is a place where science, mystery come together into a meaning. But I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be holistic, because this is something you can adopt right now. And being holistic means not embracing everything or rejecting anything, but just being open minded to it. Listen, listen to how other people live. One of the greatest things that I've done in my entire life, and I was very lucky because I grew up in a very international family, is I lived abroad. I studied with a lot of people from all over the world. And it was always interesting to see their points of view because they had a different way of seeing life, understanding life, and basically being. So one of the basic fundamental equation that we use in the Holistic Center is I boil it down to IQ plus EQ plus SQ equals a whole being. Let me explain this. IQ, I think we all know it's the intelligence quotient, and that's how intelligent a person is at solving things and everything. But the last few decades, we started thankfully hearing about EQ, which is the emotional quotient of someone, the way a person has a certain amount of emotions to relate to life, to relate to people, and to also help solve problems through this emotional quotient. So having a good IQ matched by a good EQ is good. You know what's even better? Having a good SQ. Now, this is out of lack of better word, I wanted to come out with, okay, you've got intelligence, you've got emotional, but if you're very high on the intelligence level, but you're very low on the emotional level, and Lord knows we've got plenty of people like that right now who are very celebrities right now who are very public. We can also see that, yeah, they do good things, but yeah, there's some really icky things that they do. And same thing on the other side of the equation. If you have a very low IQ, very high EQ, you're a very emotional being and you have a hard time maneuvering life. And this is where SQ comes in. SQ is sort of wraps it up together. SQ is, again, out of lack of better word, I didn't know how to call it. It's spiritual quotient or life quotient, your understanding of life, which basically uses your IQ and your EQ and puts it all together. So somebody who has, again, high IQ, low EQ, and maybe some SQ, it's not a really well balanced person, right? This is not the kind of person I normally gravitate to. And that's why, in general, I have such a hard time with politics because I see high IQ, but almost no EQ, and a lot of things with decision makers and world leaders. And it's like, yeah, guys, you need that EQ, and it needs to really come up. And it is coming up now, by the way, but you also need that SQ. So our philosophy here is IQ plus EQ plus SQ equals a whole being. I made a point in the last podcast to talk about no experts, no gurus, no teachers, although we will teach some things, but we're seekers here, right? We come to the table with, hey, this works well. This has worked well for me, but that's you. I'm me. You know, what I see as blue, you might not see as blue. It might be teal. It might be, I don't know what, green. Who knows? It doesn't matter. So being open to all of this then give birth to the fourth article that I wrote. And it is, what is the very first step that you need to take when you are serious about your developing your spirituality, when you're serious about philosophy, when you're serious about how do I find the real me in all of this? Years ago, I wanted to write a book, and it's going to come up one day. But one of the passages was one of the chapters was, "Will the real me stand up?" And this was born out of trying to figure out what is essentially me and what did I take on from my environment, from my society, from my education, right? And I always like to boil it down to first principle theory, right? What's at the bare bottom, the undeniable bare bottom end of the question kind of thing. And so really, if you break down anything, whether it's studying, working, it's philosophy, it's meditation, there is one fundamental thing which fits very well with our holistic center theme. It's stillness. Stillness is the most important thing that you have in your life. It is the one thing that if you're stuck on an island by yourself, you need to find stillness. If you're in the middle of a chaotic argument, you need to find stillness. Stillness is the prerequisite for spiritual growth. It's also the prerequisite for intellectual growth. It's the prerequisite for anything. With stillness, you can finally get back into your center. You have access to all of your capacities, and you're a much more capable person than when you are in full chaos. So I wrote an article about that because finding stillness is the first step to wisdom, right? And better decision making. This especially is true when you are at work and you're being bombarded with different things. And especially in the industries where I work, where we're predominantly startups, we're designing a future that hasn't happened yet, but will happen, right? So it's very chaotic, and we need to be able to close those doors and just step into stillness, just a little bit of stillness, not thinking, not saying anything. And here, this is where things get a little tricky. It's kind of hard for most people to find stillness because we grew up in an environment where we are taught to always be on the go, to have a lot of distractions, have the latest gimmick gadget, always look at, the news. Oh, good Lord. Entertainment news. Seriously, how does those two things are oxymorons? They should not be together. News is news, entertainment is entertainment. Together, it is a very ugly cocktail meant to polarize people and separate people from one another. But this is where stillness comes in and is the most important thing that you need to do. Why do you need to do that? Well, because guess what? Leaders do that. Decision makers do that. Doesn't mean that they always, have the right solutions or use it wisely. Wisely for me, of course. But stillness is your prerequisite to finding out who you truly are and to get back into that center that is yours, finding your inner compass, your own gnosis. So I kind of challenge you to find your own place to have stillness. Don't give us excuses that, oh, you work in a cubicle, it's very loud and everything. Yeah, I'm sure it happens too. I have two chocolate labs, and when they want to have fun, they let me know about it. But I also have little tricks and tips, right? I'm lucky because I get to work from home. So my environment is fairly quiet and everything. But when I do go and work in another place, in a cafe or something like that, I go with two tools that really help me: earplugs, and I've got noise canceling headsets. Those work really well. And you can do that even if you're in a cubicle. You might not be able to switch off your monitor, or, maybe your boss will not like if you do that, but try to do it, or at least try to face away from it, because there's a lot of light that are coming out of it, a lot of blue lights that are not that great. The frequency is not perfect for our brains. These are the things that you can start to do. And you would be amazed if you did that, ideally every hour, but at least once in the morning, once in the afternoon. That stillness will give you everything you need to have to get back into a more peaceful part of you, and eventually learn to love silence, which, by the way, for someone like me who is very much born a Leo, it's very hard to get to love silence. And I actually crave it to this day. But find that, do that. This is the first challenge that we're giving you guys out there is, don't give us excuses. Find a way to have silence. And you'll notice that by finding that stillness, you might even find it while you're driving. Driving is a great exercise in finding stillness, because there will always be some weirdo out there who has to cut in front of you, or who sees you coming and there's no one behind you, but just has to pull up in front of you and then drive very slowly. And boy, let me tell you, when you're a Mediterranean like me and you love driving old cars, and of course, unfortunately, it's not fun to drive these days, stillness really helps, because I definitely have gone through a lot of expletives in my past life. But you know what? That's just the way it is. I also talk about one of the first things that you will go through, and this is an article, by the way, you can find on the holisticcenter.com, is you'll find that you're bombarded with ideas, bombarded with thoughts that just come in and come out. That's normal. So stillness has a best friend, and that best friend is observe, non-judgmental observation. This is where you really want to get into a role of who is Nicholas? Who is John? Who is Sally? Who is that which I call I? This I. What is this I? And just asking that. And by the way, this is one of the prerequisite to Buddhism. That's what Buddhism does. It says, what is I? What is this I that calls itself I? Me or me, two different things. So get into that mode of observing yourself because that was stillness. Stillness gives you access to observing yourself. And if you're wise enough to not judge yourself, just go, hey, I'm a soul having a human experience here. Thoughts come, thoughts go. And like the Tibetan Buddhists say, it's like a bird in the sky. You don't know where it came from. You don't know where it's going. It just is. It is what it is. Thoughts are not me. They might be produced in my head. Maybe they're influenced by something else. And most of the time they are influenced by something else. Something I did, something I saw, something that slipped in my mind without me being fully aware of it. Thoughts are thoughts. Observe your thoughts. Let them go. Get back into that stillness all the time, over and over and over and over again. And by the way, this takes, if you're lucky, days, weeks, most of the time, most likely months and years, and in some cases, decades, depending on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. It's a little bit easier for introverts to find stillness and peace. Not that they have no thoughts, but it's a little bit harder for people like me, us, who are extroverts, but still very important to do. And then, stillness practice. Start with something very simple. Try to go a second without a thought. Then, once you feel comfortable with that, go with 2 seconds and then build it up to 3 seconds, 5 seconds, all the way up to 30 seconds. And then try to see if you can go a minute without any thoughts and more and more and more until you can stay hours on end without any thoughts. And that's called pure meditation. Different types of meditation out there, but this is really the main thing of when we think of meditations of sitting in zazen without any thoughts. It's really uncanny, but there's a reason why we do that. It's very uncomfortable for a lot of people because, well, what do? Well, you don't do anything. That's the whole point of Wu Wei. You don't do anything, right? But what is it to not do anything? What's the point of not doing anything? Well, something magical happens once you get there. Once you get into that state of complete stillness, which engenders silence, you get into what the Gnostics call, you tap into the monad basically, or you tap into the pleroma, depending on which terms you've heard before. And that is that original essence, the life behind life, the energy source behind life, or God, if you want to call it this way, the all, whatever the term is, it doesn't really matter. And you find something really amazing once you tap into that monad is everything melts away. Your identity no longer is, and it's not scary. It doesn't mean that you're no longer Nicholas or whoever you are. You just stop and you rekindle with that original source, original self. What does that have to do with business? Well, it has a lot to do with business because that is so important when you are bombarded with activities, bombarded with decisions, and you're being dragged left and right. You need to know who you are essentially. And we need to be reminded that, well, one day we will croak. One day we will go away. And that if right now I get taken away from what I'm doing right here, life still goes on. Somebody else will do this. It doesn't matter. But I'm still a soul having a human experience. And I love it. And this is where the Stoics are really important for us because it means go into it, be an active participant of life. Use stillness as a background for your daily practice. Start small and just build it up as you go ahead. So that's it as far as this podcast is concerned, as far as what I just wrote here. I'm going to start to invite people on the podcast, and there are people who are practitioners. They might do certain modalities that they're very familiar with. And I'm going to start inviting the people that I have been following for many years. And they've always had an uncanny way of being spot on, right? When there are big changes happening in the world. I've got a good friend of mine who, well, she channels Archangel Gabriel. And, on the surface, it might make you go, really interesting. But reading Shelley Young for so many years and finding how on top of accurate she was every time, I was like, wow, there's something to be said about that. Today, she's one of my closest friends. Kristen Fontana, who's also, on the mystical astrology side of things, same thing. She just, man, she hits it perfectly every single day. So we're going to be talking to people like that and others, of course, about what they do, why they do the things they do. How does it fit in our society? And again, always answer that same fundamental question that we have here at the Holistic Center is what do ancient civilizations and philosophies have to teach a modern world? It's needed more than ever. If you watch the news, it's eyebrow raising to say the least, but it's happening for a very good reason. We'll also talk about, manifestations and things like that. There are so many things to talk about. One of my favorite topic is, we're going to talk about 3D, 4D and 5D and what is it about people with dimensions and thinking that is there's a fine line between one dimension to the other. No, it, there's no such thing like that. Or timelines. There's not one timeline, there are multiple timelines. It's a quantum flux field out there for crying out loud. It all exists at the same time, and you can collapse that potential simply by being attuned. We'll talk about that one too, because manifestations is not a very easy thing to talk about. There we go. Please go and read the holistic center.com. I've got, a bunch of articles that I've started to put on that. I've got enough to go for a whole year. And as you may be aware, I've got enough to go and talk for a very long time. So let us know what your thoughts are. Let us know what has worked for you, what works for you. Maybe something new you've discovered along the way right now or as of lately. There are also, by the way, some fantastic people who are very steeped into modern times. And I'm talking about quantum theorists, and some of them have a psychology background or a degree too. And these guys are absolutely fantastic because they're wrapping up these ancient philosophies and religions into a very modern scientific mind frame. And we're going to talk about these guys too because they're absolutely phenomenal. Okay. So thank you for watching this. My name is Nicolas Zart. I am your host for this. And I hope some of this, tidbit of ancient philosophies can help you even at work, in your love life, and all of your life. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And to please, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. We always want to hear your point of view. And we'll see you next week again. Thank you. Bye bye.